Hi, I'm Megan with Megan Mathers Yoga, and today I'm talking about how to train nervous system resilience with our breath while we practice. There are several ways to breathe. If you've been a yoga practitioner for any amount of time, you know that pranayama is its own limb out of the 8 limbs of yogic practice laid out in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. So it is a vast practice of breath control that we can use and utilize for our benefit. Prana is life force energy, which comes from that breath, that life-giving breath. And our breath is connected to our nervous system. Our breath and utilizing breath control is the quickest way and most effective way to change the way we feel. So when I'm talking about nervous system resilience, I'm talking about a nervous system that can be heightened into a hyper or hypoarousal state, into that sympathetic nervous system, which is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And it can also go into a more regulated state, into that parasympathetic nervous system of rest, digest, recovery, reproduce. We need a nervous system that can fluctuate in between so we don't get stuck in one or the other. And usually the case is that we get stuck in either fight or flight or freeze or fawn. And it can be really hard once we get caught in that hamster wheel to get out. So I like to train nervous system resilience through breath while I practice yoga and just combine all those efforts into our practice. How do I do that? When we warm up in yoga practice or move through our prime sequence in my steel mace vinyasa classes, we practice Ujjayi Breath. What is Ujjayi Breath? If you're not familiar, it sounds almost like Darth Vader or the ocean. That same little slight constriction in the back of the throat, like you're fogging up a mirror. So you can practice with me here as if your hand is a mirror. Fog it up. Notice that slight constriction at the back of the throat. And now do the same thing with your mouth closed, exhaling out of the nose. There's the exhale. Now can you do it on the inhale? Do this for a few rounds with me. Ujjayi, which means victorious breath. Inhale. Continue doing this as I talk. And notice how this helps you elongate your breath in and out, so it's slowing your breath down. And it's also very warming. You might feel that warmth. This allows the nervous system to settle and regulate back into that parasympathetic state. So this is a very calming, grounding breath. So when we arrive into our practice, we're centering and arriving, we're warming up our neural system to our conditioning practices and movements, and letting go of the day, letting go of the stress of the day, allowing us to be present and orient to where we are. Once we get into my prime or into the conditioning series or part of my classes, we have an opportunity to begin to train that sympathetic nervous system and regulation. So now we're finding more dynamic fluidity in between the two. And how we do that is introducing the force level breath and the chugging breath. The force level breath sounds like this. T-C-H-O-O on the exhale. And as you do that, you might practice a couple of times. Notice what happens with your core. You might notice the activation of your pelvic floor and your deep core muscles as you chew. So what this does is, as we're moving through our conditioning exercises, is it engages our floor and our core so we are fully supported. It also activates the sympathetic nervous system, bringing us into more of an aroused state, which isn't bad, right? We're training resilience. We just don't want to get stuck. So this helps bring us into that dynamic state of sympathetic arousal. And in between, in our rest between conditioning practices, we bring ourselves back down with the chugging breath, which is a big inhale through the nose. Pause at the top. The pause is important. And as you exhale, you either shrug through the shoulders or heavy heels, soft knees. And this brings the nervous system back down into recovery and a reset of the nervous system before we move into the next exercise with that force level breath. So we do this an amount of times, going up and bringing it back down for a reset, moving up, bringing it back down for a reset. And after we move through our conditioning portion of the class, we go into flow, which we bring back our Ujjayi breath. So we're now beginning to wind down, and our heart rate is probably picked up quite a bit from our conditioning portion of the class. So now we're bringing it back down and training nervous system resilience here, because we may feel the intensity. Our muscles might be feeling a bit fatigued at this point, but we're still feeling the strength of our yoga flow, loaded and unloaded. So with the mace and without. And we continue to breathe. You might notice when something feels intense, you want to hold your breath. And so that's when I'm there continuing to remind you, breathing in and breathing out. Ujjayi breath here. So you're bringing yourself back into a regulated state of parasympathetic nervous system through the pairing of movement and breath. And eventually what can happen is we begin to move into flow state. And this is optimal. This is excellent for our nervous system to access these states of the brain, the flow state. I believe it's the gamma delta waves of the brain. So that is the goal eventually. And with still mace vinyasa, we can eventually get there. And it is training and helping us find that resilience in our nervous system. So in our day-to-day lives, we're less triggered. And even when we are triggered, we're able to recognize, whoo, I'm up here and I need to be down here. And so you bring in that Ujjayi breath or a multitude of other pranayama practices that yoga provides to bring us back down into a state of calm. And when we bring ourselves back down into a state of calm, we have more blood flow and oxygen to our brain, giving us more clarity so we can make decisions with more clarity and less brain fog. It helps our digestive system to turn on and work, so we have healthy digestion happening, and it keeps us from carrying too much stress and tension in the body. Nervous system resilience these days especially is so important and such a useful skill. As you know, we're not wired to take in all the information, the news and through media and everything just bombarding us, triggers left and right. There's always an emergency. Our stress levels and cortisol levels can be through the roof. This can really mess with our digestion, like I said, and many other key facilitations, key, lack of a better word, movements of the body that we rely on to be healthy. And we also know that stress is a big cause of a lot of health issues, hormonal imbalances, and so on and so forth. So if we can practice nervous system resilience in a yoga practice, adding that to our training and even our weight practice and our movement modalities, it just allows us to get more from our practice and to feel more supported off of the mat. So I can't wait to see you in real time working with these different breath practices and to hear how this supports you in your real everyday life. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you soon.